we've seen that fraudulent returns go down over time. When they learn they can't get away with it, right? They stop trying it. Getting that individual data really helps shape the activities, right? It helps shape the bad actors, right? The thieves, the dishonest customers, helps shape the activity you want from them. Because they can no longer get away with it, and you have that individual data to be able to justify your actions.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever our listeners find themselves. Welcome back to another segment of Conversations on Retail Asset Protection Risk Mitigation podcast series. You guys know me, Brand Elverston. No introduction, I hope, is needed. If it is, ping me on LinkedIn or separately, and I'm happy to share my background. Today we've got a special guest, and it's special. You'll figure it out during the conversation. This is a unique conversation, and it addresses the Achilles heel of retail, which, as we all know, is inventory visibility and inventory management. So they are not a new player in this space. They are one, though, that I feel and others collectively needs a refresh and presence in the industry as a force multiplier. So we've got Jacob with us. I'll give Jacob a couple seconds to intro himself and his background, and then we'll get started. So Jacob, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brand. Yeah, so I've been with DiSa Digital Safety for about 8 years now, and before that, I was much more on the product space, not so much of a solution space. And it was really interesting when I came across DiSa. I had just left another company, and we had all sorts of problems with some retailers. And I was like, man, if only there was a cleaner solution that would have resolved some of our issues, right? Things would have been a lot easier. And then I came upon DiSa, and I was like, man, this is exactly what I was looking for. So yeah, been with DiSa for 8 years, and really excited to talk to you today.
Good. Well, welcome. So to frame up the conversations, guys, DiSa, or Digital Safety, is a familiar name to probably many of our listeners, Jacob. About 10 years ago, so everybody knows, I retired from Walmart in March of 17. And prior to that, my staff was heavily engaged with digital safety and the Loss Prevention Research Council and several other major retailers in a technology called point of sale activation, POSA. And the theory back then, and we'll talk through what's really progressed since then, the theory was back then that anything that had firmware on it, so a cell phone, video games, even anything that you had to go online with or had the capability of going online, when you bought it on the T-log, you got an unlock code. And when you tried to power up that device for the first time, it asked you for the code, and you entered that code one time, never again, and it was fully functional. The obvious benefit was a theft defense for the crooks. So they could steal all they wanted, but it'll never work because you don't have the unlock code. And, I'll do the Reader's Digest version. There were a lot of, chewing on nails there for a few years and trying to figure out how to get the impact. And in my estimation at the time, I think our collective weak link, the retailers, not you guys, was the ability to make that public. Lowe's was about the most aggressive. I remember they had a huge placard on an end cap, and it simply stated, steal it and it doesn't work. It wasn't, your normal marketing soft messaging and not to be offensive and, something you'd read and you're like, what? It was pointed. And so for various reasons, various retailers, I don't want the audience to think, wow, I didn't know that was still a thing. Because DiSa has grown in capability since then. I had the privilege of re-engaging with these guys prior to the holidays, and I'm excited about what they're doing. And this is an opportune time. Most capital budgets are being refreshed at the end of the FY, so January, February. So this is a timely conversation. So we'll do a quick historical walkthrough with Jacob from the point of sale activation days and what's changed in that technology. And then we want to get into the inventory serialization under the header of inventory management and visibility. So Jacob, give us a thumbnail walk from POSA forward.
Yeah. So so POSA, like you said, right? It did what it said it was going to do, right? If somebody stole the product, it locked them out, and it worked really well to stop them from doing that. The challenge with it is that stores still had hesitation about putting product out, right? And so if it's still going to be locked up and you have to enter an activation code, well then, what are we doing the activation code for? We saw some great results in stores that learned, hey, yeah, no, we did get some theft, but we have a lot of data that said over time that theft dropped down. Like they would learn it doesn't work, and so they'd essentially just stop trying.
Exactly.
But again, it was really trying to change a whole mindset of, people are going to steal it if it's out. I need to lock it up, and so it made it a little bit of a challenge. But in order to build POSA, one thing we had to do was build in serialization, right? We had to be able to look at each item uniquely, and so while we were building out POSA, we built out our serialization business. And part of the core of what we did with that is what we call single scan serialization. So rather than having to scan one barcode, then scan a serial number, it's
Like
just
they
one
do
bar.
today for selling anything with a serial number
Sure.
in
Yeah,
most
exactly.
retailers.
Yeah. And so this just kind of limits it down to one barcode, which really again limits the opportunity for errors. I mean, we all know in retail, if there's an opportunity for an associate or a customer to do something wrong, they're going to do it wrong and they're going to do it a lot. And if there's some loophole, someone's going to figure it out. So by putting everything in one barcode, it really removes the opportunity for error. And I think that's really where DiSa has kind of leaned in, is we said, okay, it's, thousands of stores, thousands of associates, there's turnover all the time. What can we do to just remove any opportunity for human error? So when it comes back for returns, we're going to tell them, we're not making a guess based on how many times this person has returned something. We don't even care who the person is. We're just going to look at this individual item and we're going to say, okay, can this be returned? Yes or no? Has it been sold? Is it within the return window? Does it come from another retailer? And we check all that instantaneously, provide the exact response and the reason code to the associate. Hey, you can't return this because of X, right? And then it just works, right? It just removes the opportunity for the associate to make a wrong judgment error, or
The cool
for
the
sorry, go
cool
ahead.
term back in the day, one of our senior leaders at Walmart when I was there, he said, we have got to learn how to make it harder to get wrong than right.
Right,
And,
yeah,
when you're asking a cashier to scan 53 barcodes, and the line's backed up and it's Saturday and everything's headwinds, you're going to screw it up. So
oh
we
yeah,
have got to learn how to make it harder to get wrong than right. And you provide a great example. We did the same thing, dude. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the rollout of EAS, but the same
hmm
arguments. If you put an EAS tag on it, you'll sell more. Feel free to unlock, put it on the end cap. And I know that because I was the spearhead of that at Walmart in the late
sure,
90s. And of course, it didn't work like that. We lost more product. But we also learned a valuable lesson that we had to relearn when POSA came out in 2010, 2014, whenever that was.
hmm
The messaging has to come first. If your
yeah,
customers don't understand the risk, like you guys experienced, it's going to take a while to burn in oh crap, it actually won't work. And it was the same thing with EAS. We had the halo effect for a little while. And then if the
hmm
store fails to execute, stopping you at the door and logging it on the FT lead log and all that crap we used to
right.
do, it doesn't matter. It
Well,
doesn't
and it's
matter.
really, yeah, and your messaging is really two-part, right? So one part is making sure the customers know, right? This isn't
Yep.
going to work if you steal it. The second part is making sure the associates know, hey, if they try to steal it, it's not going to work. Make sure that's clear to them. Make sure it's clear to associates. I mean, let's be honest too, right? If something's easy for someone to take, we know there's a lot of associates that are also taking those, right?
Oh, sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and I can't really give details, but there were some very clear and obvious signs early on that it was associates that were trying to take advantage of this, even with the posts on there, right? So by getting that messaging out there, I mean, we had a store, their sales were up on the item. So we were looking at year over year sales, right? Their sales were up on an item over 100% year over year. And I went and visited the store. It was out in Dallas, and I said, "Hey,
That's their data. That's
that's
not
their
your
data.
data. That's their
That's
data.
their data. We didn't have the
Yep.
previous year's sales, right? So So we were looking at that just to kind of compare. And again,
Mhm.
this is one store. Let's be 100% clear, right? This is in a very small sample. It was the biggest performing by far. I went there and I asked. I said, "What's going on here?" And they said, "Oh, this is yours. Yeah, let me show you." And they took me right to an end cap. They said, "We used to have this locked up, right? Now we can put it on the end cap." And I was like, "Well, what do you think about theft?" And they said, "Yeah, we get some stolen, but we are selling so many right now that it doesn't really matter, right?" Now, the saying it doesn't really matter really depends on your audience, right? Because
Sure.
it doesn't matter to someone, but it absolutely matters to someone else. And so it's balancing that and making sure there's awareness and everybody's on board. But there's definitely an opportunity. I mean, the solution definitely works from that standpoint. There were some other issues, like to be honest, when you're inputting an activation code on anything you sell, you definitely sell more than you steal. And so now all these good customers are having to input an activation code. So there's been some growth and some changes that we've had to execute on our side to improve the product to make that no longer an issue. Like anything, there's some learnings, there's some improvements you make along the way.
Yeah, what I find interesting with your all's history and and the backstory, guys, when we had dinner with one of their executives and Jacob is the local guy. Um, I was listening more than talking, which sounds strange for a lot of people on the podcast. At how far you guys have come from, let's face it, POSA was specifically designed to prevent or limit instances of theft.
Hmm.
So if I go to a buyer, the argument really isn't a far step from the same thing I did in the late 90s with buyers about EAS. If you put the damn tag on, they'll steal less, you'll sell more, your inventory will go down, so your inventory carrying costs go down. Same crap.
Hmm.
And EAS is a technology in my mind, and I'm not reserved at all about sharing this, has long passed its expiration date. It's just not an
Sure.
effective defense. So you guys strategically have made a very profound shift, thus this conversation, from limit opportunities of theft. And now you've shifted into the much broader application of inventory visibility and management. So talk a little bit about, we've made that journey, and
Mhm.
there isn't a retailer out there that doesn't struggle daily with inventory management. So walk us through kind of where you are on that.
Yeah, so we you're right. We have made a significant shift. So like I said, serialization early on was something that we recognized was something one that had much broader application. It doesn't just have to be a smart device; it could be anything, right? And we'd already built that to enable to track POSA. So we moved to a serialization model, and so now it's still a single scan barcode, but now you're able to look at each item individually. You're able to track all those items individually, both through POS, through returns, and we've been going with that for quite a while. Through these 8 years, right, we've been growing significantly about with the items that we serialize and we track, significantly reduce returns because we're validating each one of those items really against the three big are fraud, right, a stolen item being returned, past return window, and then um, and then the other being arbitrage, right, coming from another retailer. And so one of the things that we are learning from an inventory side is, let's say someone steals a unit from a store, um, and then they go and then they turn around and they return that unit to that store. Now that store, let's say it has 10 units on hand, but they think they have 10 units on hand, but they stole one. They go and return it. And now they're showing 11 units on hand at that store. They really only have 10. So not only did you just give them money for that, for whatever they stole, right? You also just created a unit of phantom inventory. So you're kind of getting dinged twice there, right? And so by us being able to stop that transaction and limit that bad activity, and really just limit a return for a retailer. Obviously, you want to take care of the customer, but I think we can all agree no one wants any returns, right? The ideal situation is nothing ever
Right.
comes back. And so, we help significantly to limit those returns and improve their inventory visibility, um, and just the cleanliness of the data, right? When you start looking at everything as eaches instead of under this broad UPC, it really improves your clarity. Um, and so then that led, with the growth of RFID, there's been a lot of growth now to linking and attaching the RFID tag to the what we call the DiSa barcode or our serialized barcode. So, you already have RFID that you're using for inventory, right? The challenge with that, at least that we've found with most retailers so far, is the cost to then introduce the RFID reading capabilities at all the registers is immense, right? And so we're already integrated at the POS side. We're not integrated on the inventory side. So if you link that RFID to the DiSa barcode, now we can bridge that gap from inventory to POS. It tracks the DiSa barcode at POS. It tracks the RFID through inventory. And honestly, it's been a significant shift. Over half of our units are now being placed on RFID tags, and it's just simpler for the suppliers. They already have to put an RFID tag on. Why not just put the DiSa barcode on at that time? Kill two birds with one stone, and really, again, be able to bridge the gap between inventory and POS.
So great point. A perfect segue. Back to the cost, and I can say this because obviously I'm a former retailer, but one of the biggest challenges with broad RFID adoption is the sticker shock. I mean, let's face it, not too many retailers can drop $100,000 per store and then go back through the cat fights of the suppliers putting on, even though they're pretty cheap, RFID tags on everything and figuring out and then the huge expense of managing the database, because RFID doesn't just read the item once. Every time it sees it, it reads it. So you'll wind up with zillions of lines of data. But I haven't yet seen a cost-effective way of reading the RFID tag at the point of sale. Main reason, bleed over. So if I'm on aisle 6 ringing this person up and the register 7's right next to me, I could have items on register 7 I'm reading on register 6, and if my attempt is to log that as sold, it makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible. And go back to the cost. You have to have readers on every register or every proximity. It gets really, really hard. Serialization eliminates that. I can tell you the same value prop on the information. I sold it on this register on this day, and without having the complexities of the technology. And one other point you made, Jacob, I think is really important for everybody is serialization in a dumbed down explanation is nothing more than an extended barcode that's on every item in the store today, except that extension is the intelligence layer nobody has. That is a unique item identifier, unique. So if you take a 6-pack of Coke, same barcodes on every 6-pack of Coke across the world. But if you serialize, I know there are different numbers associated with each of those 6 cans. So again, if I'm looking at inventory visibility, I'm a buyer, and I'm like, look, I don't really know what's going on. I got a lot of slop in my margin. Yeah, fraudulent returns, great. But anytime a retailer scans that serialized barcode, we capture the data, and I can tell you your claims anytime that you scanned it, potentially for a price change, which is yet another a huge contributor to shrink, and phantom inventory only amplifies that. Any time you scan that, that's a data point for the retailer in serialization of that specific item. So that's the strategic shift, everybody, that Jacob's talking about, is from, stop people from stealing crap to getting intelligent inventory. And it's a layer that is very inexpensive to layer on that we don't have today. So in my mind, it's UPC barcodes, been around since dirt. RFID on the other end of the spectrum, cost prohibitive, complexities, et cetera. I'm a huge fan of RFID, but not everybody can do it. And serialization is in between. That is, in my mind, a bridge to item level visibility without having to bite off the big monkey and drop $100,000 per store or whatever to fully outfit RFID.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So we've seen, and we've had enough people talk to us, and we've been working on this long enough to see that, anytime you add any hardware to anything, right, the time and complexity and cost to all of that is
Mm.
magnified significantly, right? We're a back-end solution. There is no hardware required, right? There's an integration through an API. Once we're integrated there, I mean, you're able to read that barcode and you're able to send us the data. Now we're capturing that. We handle all, even with the bridging that RFID to the DiSa barcode, even that's handled on the back end between either the RFID printers and suppliers. So really, it's just taking what currently today is a physical challenge, right? Where you're dealing with hardware and finding a software solution to do it. I heard a great analogy about the difference between hardware and software recently. It's that with hardware, if you wanted to make a hardware baby, you would, no matter what you do, it's going to be one mom, then it's going to take 9 months, right? No matter, you can try to change anything in there, but it's really going to be one mom, 9 months. Software, just bring in nine software moms, and in 1 month they can all do their part and knock it out,
Yeah.
right? Software is flexible, right? We've even found we can adjust on our side for changes to retailer policies and things like that, or all of that through a software side is so much easier to execute and so much cheaper. And so a lot of our success and our discussions have been able to, let's just leverage this as a software solution to, again, bridge the gap to what, I mean, honestly, most retailers are probably at some point going to be having RFID readers, at the register. But you're talking every register, every location, over time. I mean, that's gonna take a long time and a lot of money. And so this can literally, do it today, pretty much. Or within a very short time frame without any hardware changes.
Yeah, and that's huge, because it takes away the argument and the pushback is too expensive. I can't tell you how many times I heard that, in my time on the W-2 at Walmart. Everything was too expensive unless they were paying us to take it. It was the same answer from finance and capital committees. Too expensive. Okay, compared to the, umpteen billions I'm losing, hemorrhaging,
Right.
and in inventory, this is too expensive. So, um, on the digital, let's go back to point of sale activation, because there
Yeah.
are some, every retailer's at a various points of maturity of what they do.
Yeah.
So back to POSA, you guys took away the clunkiness
Hmm.
at some point of having to put in the 4-digit code and all that. Now it is a seamless process.
Yeah.
Still the same benefit. I just took away the customer friction. Walk me through that.
Yeah. So just like you were saying, we found that, we were punishing good customers while we were, trying to punish the bad. Right. And so in working through that process and just how technology has evolved, right? There's so almost anything you do anymore, you have to register it, you have to get the app, you have to, who knows what other hoops you have to jump through in order to use a given piece of technology and any smart device, really. Right. And so what we're doing now is we work with the suppliers to be able to provide them the sales data on any given item. And so let's take, we'll take we'll just take a smart device. Call it a tablet. We'll take a tablet, for example. We'll work with the supplier, and when the customer boots that up the first time, it goes to their screen to register the device. Right? When they register it, they either have them input the DISA number or they can embed it in there, and it's uploaded to them. And then the supplier at that point will ping our server. So we have an API connection. They ping our server and we validate that item just like we would for a return. Essentially the same thing. We say, yes, this item was sold, or no, right? If the answer is yes, then the supplier just goes ahead through the normal activation process. The product works. The consumer has no idea that that item was just being validated. If it does not work, if it was not purchased, right, the supplier then has the opportunity to work with the customer to try to double evaluate that. That they can ask them for a receipt, or they make sure it doesn't work, and then they communicate the issue. So again,
Yeah.
it even removes the retailer from that portion, right? They don't have to go back to the retailer and try to fix something, right? If they work right there with the supplier, they validate whether it was legitimately purchased or not. And and we've seen all the tricks like, oh yeah, I have a receipt, and so they have a receipt. The serial number doesn't match, the timing doesn't match,
Yeah,
right?
wave a
Like,
receipt in the air, walking out
yeah,
the door. Okay.
yeah, exactly. So, it's up to the supplier, but again, which is a good thing, right? Let's remove this all away from the retailer. There's no activation code on receipt. There's nothing additional anybody has to do unless the item was stolen. And if the item was stolen, then yeah, there's absolutely hoops to jump through, and that's what you want,
That's where
right?
you
You want
want
to,
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You want to
So
make it hard.
yeah, so that's been a really seamless solution. We tested this on like the medical testing kits kind of things, and which was a really good use case where people are stealing those off the shelf, and then they go and submit all their stuff, and uh, and there was a lot of issues with theft and other things on those, and it really kind of shut that down because if they didn't have that, if they couldn't validate that serial number, then we clearly knew it wasn't purchased, right? And they wouldn't fulfill the rest of it, right? And so there was, for the suppliers, that was a big hit, right? Because not only were they just lost the revenue of something being stolen, but then they had to take activity, and process this, sample or whatever, and they were doing all
Yeah.
that for free or worse than free, right? And so we had a lot of success with that. Other smart devices, similar process, right? It goes to it just validates it, and then again, the good customers never know that their product was just being evaluated.
Yeah. And then, in the case that, okay, it doesn't work in my lifetime, it always comes back to the customer service desk or the refund desk, whatever.
Mhm.
And, people get animated and they think, well, the more persistent and pissed off I look, the more likely they are to say, you know what? Okay, we'll do it this time. And,
Sure.
but then the back end is you give the capability to take that away from that poor cashier. I
Mhm.
can't process this. The system is telling me uh, this was never purchased. And,
Right.
there was a different consideration back in the day. A 1-800 number would print on the denial receipt that I could give the customer and say, look, it's out of my hands. I cannot override the system. Call that 800 number. And of course, you never hear from them again.
Right.
Um, but anyway, so two different technologies. I don't want everybody to start rubbing their temples saying, what in the hell is going on? And you can have either or, both, or
Mhm.
just one. So point of sale activation, it's about what, 10-year-old technology at least, if not a dozen or maybe even 15.
Mhm.
Um, Very effective, but a narrower business use case.
Yep.
You guys removed a lot of the clunkiness and the complexity out of the purchasing process and the system demands and requirements. And then we can independently go to serialization, which is where you guys push the bookends out on the use case. And it's an inventory management technology in the exact same light as RFID. And so, main difference being one is line of sight, the other is not. Obviously, I don't need to see a barcode to get RFID to read the item. I just have to be within range of the reader. Um, and ours is much like a UPC barcode, the serialization, you do have to see it and you do have to
Mhm.
scan it. But when you look at that from a course of action matrix or a decision matrix, it makes perfect sense. As some retailers want to, slow dance into technology. So if you have the serialization, you're immediately getting the benefit of intelligence of that specific item, and it gives you another leg up on what no retailer knows today. And I know I've had this discussion with a few of them. Oh, yeah, we have item level shrink and we have, I'm like, no, you don't. So if you do, then if I walk in your store today and I grab the iPhone 17, give me the percent of that item's sales that have been stolen. And it's not available
Yeah.
uh, because of the complexities of shrink and the black hole that it is. So, yeah, on that podcast yesterday with Chase Benny and anyway, 7 other panelists, we talked about that. And I saw some of the other panelists raise an eyebrow. They're like, wait a minute, you don't know specific item shrink? I'm like, no, that is one of the biggest hindrances to getting the inventory management component more complete to understand where the hell did it go?
Yeah.
Because we don't
No,
know today. It's just gone.
yeah, no, it's really interesting. We've had a lot of conversations where we'll be looking at a new category or a new opportunity, and and they'll say, oh no, we think our shrink is around this, or right, and you put a individual item number on each one of those units, right, and you start tracking it that way, and we could tell you exactly how many you're losing, right? And then we've even done things where we'll look at everything down to, okay, how many have they serialized, how many is sold. So even if it never appears again, even if they never try to return it, right, we're able to look at what's the delta between what's been serialized and what's been sold in this retailer and how many are missing and that type of stuff. So you can really, I mean, we've even done some things where we know that something's in a case pack of 4, for example, and they're part of this lot or batch, right? And we've seen 2 of those sell through, and we know that they ship in cases, right? So we know that there are 2 more at least in this store at any given time, right? So you're starting to, again, even without RFID, you can still, with the software solution, you can still get individual item detail, that's really compelling. And then something interesting that you were talking about with the on the shrink side and everything was the view of shrink too. I think it differs when you get to see that individual view, right? Because we've had people tell us, well, like because we stopped past return window, for example, and we've been told, well, no, look, we're already stopping past return window. But one of the interesting stats with that we found through different retailers and things that's been pretty constant is the average attempts on a past return window item. Actually, maybe I'll ask you, what's your guess? How many times on average, if somebody attempts to return something that's past return window, how many times do they attempt to return it?
3.
Oh man, you're that's wow, you're good. You know your stuff, right? That's
Well,
exactly it.
hell, I was in retail for
Yeah, that's right.
25
That's right.
years.
We've had a lot
Is
of
that
people that have
right?
been surprised, but that's exactly it's like 2.8
Okay.
actually. So rounding up,
Okay.
it's 3. And what we found was really interesting. So the first time, oftentimes they try it with a receipt, right? And I don't even realize, I don't know what the policy is, right? I'm just going to go try to return it. That gets rejected. Sometimes really quickly, sometimes later, but usually the same store, right? They'll try the exact same item, and now it's magically become a non-receipted return, right? So they tried it with a receipt first time, second time without a receipt. The third time, so each time they get rejected, we don't actually care whether they have a receipt or not, right? We're looking at the item. We're not looking at the receipt. And so the third time, they try it either at a different store or at a different time of day at the same store. And so like, oh, well, that associate remembers me, that's why they're
Yeah.
rejecting it. I'm just going to go try it at a different store, a different time. Again, non-receipted refund. And so it's really interesting, right? So yeah, you're right. This retailer, you can, a lot of the retailers now are saying we can stop our past return window items. And you're absolutely right. If they give you the credit card or if they give you the receipt, but if they turn that into a non-receipted refund, then there's no other way to really track it, right? There's no way to validate it. And again, 2.8 times is the average amount of times that they attempt to return it without a receipt. So they're going to try it again, and if you don't have some sort of other protection there, then they're going to get away with it.
Yeah. So your footprint. So DiSa is an international company. You guys are based out of Singapore, I believe. Um, Obviously with US presence, Jacob being the guy. Where are you guys finding, in what region of the world are you guys finding the most traction? Is it the US? Is it EMEA, LATAM, APAC, or is it pretty much uniform?
Yeah, no. So I mean, the U.S.
Okay.
U.S. the most for sure. There's different things that we're doing in Asia and some other projects there, but from the retail standpoint, U.S. is our strongest. Um, but it, but that technology, the single scan serialization and that tracking capability, some other use cases have been like similar to like a POSA solution, and that has been really strong in Asia, and some other places. But yeah, from a retail standpoint, the U.S. has been our strongest for sure.
Yeah, and just an interesting estimation of inventory accuracy. So a lot of retailers conduct what's called a SKU inventory, stock keeping unit. which means, different than a financial inventory. So financial inventory back in the day, you'd see all the auditors running around the store with a calculator on their belt and they're going wildfire, keying in. I see 8 items at $1.89. I don't know what the hell it is. It's just 8 items at $1.89. We wanted the financial value of the physical inventory, and then we, do the reconciliation to the books and match the ledger. And if there's a delta, it shrink. The big investment with SKU inventory was I need to know how many of those 8 items at $1.89, what are they? Is it a tube of Crest, extreme whitening, gluten-free with flavor toothpaste, whatever the hell it is? So I could true up my specific items of ownership.
Yeah.
So in most retailers, when they do an annual inventory or a cyclical inventory, they prep like crazy to make sure they get a good count. So they're pulling all the boxes out of the back room, labeling them, getting all the 68 million pairs of socks in the right boxes. These are large at $1.89. This is a 5-pack at $3.96. That's as good as the inventory is ever going to be. And they're correcting the item file to make sure that what, Bubba counted in the back room is reflected in the item file. That one day a year is as accurate as that physical inventory will ever be. The next day, the audit team comes in and counts, and you would hope that the comparison of the item file and the SKU inventory result are pretty damn close. Now, they have variations because you conduct the inventory over a 8 to 12 hour period. Customers are buying crap. It could be in the cart. You get a little slop in there. But in my 22 years, SKU inventories in retail, so I'm not ratting out my my previous employer, but most retailers, exact match rate. I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think the exact match rate is for the day after inventory SKU match rate? What percentage of the inventory exactly matches?
Oh, man. The fact that you're asking that question makes me worry that it's more off than I would think. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you have like 20% loss or something, so it's like 80% match or something. I imagine it's lower because you're asking the question, but I don't know.
Yeah, we would be high-fiving like crazy if it were 80% match rate.
Yeah.
It's in the 50-odd% bracket. So 50-odd% exactly matched, which means the inverse, the 40-odd%, ain't right. Doesn't match the item file. And then when you do the variation component, and there are other, permissions in there. So if it's over $150 item, you count it this way. If it's a consumable and very high turn, you give it more flexibility before you say it's off. The best you get is in the 80% range. Again, the most accurate that you've prepared that store's inventory the year. That's the best it's ever going to be. And you're still 40-odd% wrong. So
yeah,
that in and of itself is an indictment of how hard it is to manage inventory. So reel that back. If I do price changes, and this is where the shrink comes in. So if I do everybody does price changes. And if I inventory at retail, a lot of retailers have moved to accepting whatever the hell the system says I own. When I do 1,000 price changes this week in electronics, you used to have to physically go and count it, which you can figure how the execution worked out on that. It's kind of like, close enough, screw it. But if you inventory at retail, when you execute a price change for 100 footballs, and you actually had 200, but you were too lazy to go to the back room, you only took a retail adjustment on 100. The retail adjustment you didn't take is shrink.
Yeah.
It goes straight to the bottom line. So a long explanation of the power of inventory visibility to knowing what you have will get you out of that. And it's been that way since SKU inventories came out in the late 90s, about a 50-odd%. You talk to any retailer that SKU inventories, about 50, 60% is exact match rate. And then variation 80%. So the inverse of that is compelling. Well, then what you're telling me is on the best day of your inventory, the most accurate it ever is, you're still 40% wrong.
Right.
So anyway, it's a compelling case on exactly what we're talking about is inventory visibility.
It was interesting. We did a project with a supplier actually who was trying to improve some of their inventory issues, and the retailer was telling them they had inventory issues and and missed shipments and things like that. And so they were trying to get an idea from us to validate the sell through on like specific shipments and everything.
Uh-huh.
So we were taking the DiSa numbers, or we call them a DiSa number, right? The serial numbers that were linked to each PO, and then we're able to show them the exact sell-through returns, like everything that happened within those, right? So we could say, okay, you have X amount that haven't sold to this date, and by shipment, right? We could show them that. One thing that was really interesting is we had one shipment, so you'd see like over time, based on when they downloaded the codes and started placing them, you would see the sell through of the items. It was a curve going down, right, as they shipped them and they arrived at the store and then sold out, right? They'd no longer appear there. Well, we had one shipment that was just like 100% available. There had been no sales. And we're like, hey, did something happen here? Did these get stolen? What's going on? And we flagged that to them as we were pulling this data for them, as a potential concern. We sent them that PO number, and they were actually they had a good laugh. They said, hey, this is great news. Like, hey, you didn't sell any. This is not normally wouldn't be great news. It was a Black Friday. It was their Black Friday shipment. And so what was really interesting to me though is you see this curve, right, on based on when they're downloaded and how it comes down as they sell out and how many units are available. And in the middle of that, you have this one PO, or there's a couple POs, but that are just sticking out like a sore thumb. And so if there was an issue with inventory, right, if there was a significant missed shipment, that type of stuff would show up because those DiSa numbers never appeared, right? There's going to be a couple, you're going to lose some here and there. People are going to steal some. They're never going to try to return it. We'll never see if it doesn't pass through POS, right? We're not going to see it, right? Unless it's linked to RFID, and then we can, link that way. But if there's a real issue, it will stick out. Over time, you get a trend on how much you're selling through, and how much is available per PO, and even watching those sell even years later, right? But when there's a legitimate issue, when there's a missed shipment, when there's whatever, right? That's gonna show up, and it really does stick out like a sore thumb that you're able to see. Yeah, no, something did or didn't happen here. This is not ordinary. When you're looking at it from that individual item, as an individual item. None of those individual items sold. Okay, we know there's something going on with this particular PO, this particular lot or batch.
Yeah, that again, the perfect segue. So there are retailers out there, and it's been a slow adoption, like many things, total retail loss. So instead of, the myopic, it's all theft and tasing people in the foyer and just blaming all your shrink problems on theft,
Yeah.
any seasoned practitioner in retail knows that's crap. That's an inaccurate statement. So if I'm looking at total retail loss, so I'll use Walmart as an example, and they do a very good job with that. They're looking end to end. So the opportunity, as you well know, and as do the listeners, the opportunity for loss or discrepancy happens as soon as you hit transmit on that $300 million PO to Magnavox for a crap ton of TVs. That's when you introduce the element of risk. So the question then becomes, if I'm truly trying to analyze why we have such high shrink on a product, a certain category of stores, a certain warehouse, any commonality we can find, and believe me, we've been through that rodeo multiple times in my career.
Yeah.
The total retail loss aspect starts at purchase order creation. And the onus then from me as the retailer, prove to me I got everything you billed me for. And that's where the conversation, you get the deer in the headlights. Well, what do you mean? We have automated warehouses. We have all these security guards in the shipping yard, and we know that the container didn't fall off the ship on the way from Shenzhen to LA.
Yeah.
We have no visibility to that. So this again, back to our theme of inventory visibility and management, to more effectively get our arms around what in the hell is happening in inventory. And it was a pronounced problem, of course, during COVID, because it was just flat out of control. Retailers were ordering 3 times what they could warehouse because they knew they'd probably only get a third if they were lucky, and it would be 6 months late. The pricing was all over the board, to say nothing of the confusion tariffs have introduced into the inventory valuation. So to get more specificity in inventory is a win-win in my mind, from transmitting the purchase order, being able to validate, yes, I got $300 million worth of Crest White strips. They went to these 6 distribution centers on the East Coast. They scanned them in and have some sort of evidentiary trail to solve the shrink pie. Or we do what we've done since the first store opened. We guess. It's sophisticated guesses. So I don't want to offend anybody on the phone. And that was part of my responsibility at Walmart. My team had numerous kick-ass analysts, way smarter than I'll ever be. So we had very sophisticated approximations. But at the end of the day, the operative word is an approximation. I don't friggin' know. So we take all of the data points and we try and massage it and say, yeah, that feels right. But you would think in 2026, we should be beyond approximations with all the technologies readily available, serialization being one. And so that allows me as a retailer, if I have serialized data on, let's say I pick something easy like Vizio TVs. Well, I shouldn't use that because Walmart owns them now. So Sony TVs, whatever. And they serialize it all. And when it leaves their manufacturing facilities, they assign it to a PO, as you said. And then you get the invoices, disaggregate the PO, and they start billing it out. And then it goes down to the stores. They know they got it. So they can take that out of the formula of why in the hell do we have a 26% shrink rate on Sony TVs? Well, you had them in the store. So they're either in the store or you got a serious hemorrhaging theft problem.
Yeah.
It just takes us so much farther down the road without having to spend, throwing a figure out there, it's probably not unrealistic, $100,000 to fully outfit a store minus POS readers. So if you do one of every 30 front end registers with the RFID reader, aside from the pretty significant expense, you still have to worry about bleed over reads.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I go through a closed register next to me and I'm ringing up this order and some crackhead is rolling through the unmanned lane next to me and my reader reads it, okay, it reads it, but it never has to sync to the T log to say, yeah, I read it and yeah, I sold it.
Right.
So
right.
It's complex. Serialization is so much easier with a lot of the same benefits with a very easy lift to implement. So,
yeah, I mean, really, I mean, that's the benefit, right? Is you can already read a barcode. You're already scanning them, right?
Yep.
And with a single scan, the same thing you're doing today, you can now get individual item data, right? Now, we can,
very well said.
Yeah, you may have your own ways to analyze it. We could help analyze it, but doing the same thing you're doing today, you get individual item data, right? You can clean up your inventory, you can reduce returns, you can, even by stopping those returns, we've seen that fraudulent returns go down over time. When they learn they can't get away with it, right? They stop trying it. We had an interesting so I'm a big sports fan.
Roll Tide.
Yeah.
Had to say it.
Yeah. It's in Arkansas. We've already moved on to basketball season, so hey, we're happy about
Gladly, I'm
that
sure.
right now. Yes. So anyway, we looked at jerseys for sports teams, and we looked at what was going on with those items, and it was really interesting because if a player or a team underperformed, was traded, injured, that type of stuff, the amount of returns compared to if a player or a team performed above or along with expectations, they had double the amount of bad activity, double the amount of returns, double the amount of bad returns, right? And so we were sharing this with we were talking about some of this data with some sporting goods, with a sporting goods retailer, and they said, "Oh yeah," they said, "Absolutely." So what happens is people are taking these jerseys, and then they're trying to resell them, right? And so they might
Mhm.
steal them, they might even buy them, right? And then they mark them up, they do whatever they do, and they try to resell them. If they can sell them, great. But the worst case they know is, hey, I can always go back to the retailer and return it. They're my warehouse. They're the ones who make sure that I don't lose any money on this, right? And so once we started tracking those to the individual item level, it was really interesting to see how that number went down significantly, even on the amount of attempts. So, I'm not going to go steal this anymore because I know I can no longer use this retailer as my warehouse, right? Regardless, so the player gets injured, right? I can't now go and return that item. Um, so it getting that individual data really helps shape the activities, right? It helps shape the bad actors, right? The thieves, the dishonest customers, helps shape the activity you want from them. Because they can no longer get away with it, and you have that individual data to be able to justify your actions, right? And so and again, it was really interesting and even helped shape some further discussions about, okay, how do we monitor performance, during the season and increase accordingly or decrease accordingly and that type of stuff, knowing now the activities around the players and the teams and based on their performance. So it really helped to kind of justify further actions and better activities from the retailer, um, based on because we can now get a much better idea, an individual item level detail, a player level detail on what's happening with these items that you couldn't get when you're just looking at it from the UPC even, just because of was it a fraudulent return, was it a past return window return? You get all that data to say, okay, what's really happening, what kind of bad behavior are we seeing?
And that's a really good point. Because in capital, asking for capital to solve, the top line shrink number is a real number. You inventory a store, they said you should have had 10 million, we counted 7, you blew out 3 million. That's real. That hits the
Sure. Yeah.
P&L. There is no ambiguity to that financial
Yeah.
number. But when you try and peel the onion back, how much was most retailers will know at least what department, that if you added all the departments together, it would equal that $3 million loss. But when you get below department level, that's where the specificity just goes blank. But if I'm asking for money, so let's say I see a really cool technology, RFID, computer vision, you name it, robotics, and I need 50 million bucks to roll it out in, I don't know, 1,000 stores, my highest risk stores. I'm going to that committee and asking for $50 million on pretty good estimates,
Hmm.
not specificity of data.
Yeah.
And we used to use industry leaders always used to use what was formerly called the University of Florida National Retail Security Survey, and that was published for, I don't know, 30 odd years from before I was in retail, and then I think in 2022, somewhere along the lines, NRF took it over from
Mhm.
University of Florida. And then most of the listeners will remember, the debacle with the Senate Hearing Committee when ORC valuations were profoundly overestimated, and it destroyed the credibility of the report. They had to retract that part of the report, and then NRF no longer publishes that report.
Mhm.
We used to use the data in that report. We knew it was bar napkin math. We knew it was estimations,
Yeah.
but all the retailers, 100 odd retailers that submitted data for it, they'd get a wheel. We used to call it the shrink wheel, the pie chart. And it would tell you what is virtually unchanged in all my years in retail. 37% is internal theft, 38% is external, 14% is admin. It was crap.
Mhm.
And I submitted the Walmart data for that. So I knew we didn't know. I'm like, guys, what do you think? And then about
Mhm.
2006, 2007, we got a VP in that really, he was not an AP guy. He was actually a general counsel lawyer by trade, and he questioned everything in the right way.
Mm.
And that was the shift we made to say, you know what, this is BS. 70% of every shrink dollar is not theft. So we were coming down to more of a 50-50 because we truly understood the mechanics of what I explained earlier on the
Sure.
administrative shrink opportunity and all those tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of price changes conducted every year. So that data with serialization gives me, again, more specificity when I go to those committee meetings and asking for money. So I know now what I didn't know before. And
Right.
you stop having to lock up everything that you may discover. That's not a theft problem to start with. And I know we're bumping
Right.
up on time, and I want to share this because it's really important. In the same vein as RFID, Joe Cole, the former vice president of Macy's, long term guy, great dude. Um, Macy's rolled out RFID in a lot of their riskier categories. And Joe's a seasoned guy. So there's a lot of intuition. He knows what the hell he's talking about. And not long after they started getting a lot of data back on RFID, he said, Brand, I always thought I knew how these things were happening. I've been shocked. It has been extremely informative of what is really happening because now I have the RFID tag reads of what I never received. It's in another store's back room that shouldn't have it. It walked out the door at midnight when the store was closed. So that helps me as a practitioner. I now have specificity. I can stop spending so much money throwing spaghetti against the wall in electronics and locking every damn thing up to now know, you know what? It's only the new release video games that's a risk
Yeah.
to theft. It ain't the catalog stuff.
We saw some really cool metrics. Like we'd analyze the size of the item, the price of the item, the return rate of the item. And there were a couple of things we learned that I think are really telling. One is that the smaller the item, matching with a higher price point, there was a lot more theft, right? The bigger the item was harder to steal, but you get some small item that can fit in your pocket easily in your jacket at around $50. They'd go and steal that item. Now I just mentioned price. The surprising thing was price had a lot less to do with it than we thought. It was a lot more about availability. Was the product there? They cared less about stealing than they did about getting away with it, right? What they were stealing versus could they get away with it, right? And so, again, these were learnings from the data. The number one thing is return rate. If it had a high return rate, we found that guess what? There's a high fraud rate on there too. Wasn't you just bad product? So again, getting that individual item data, and doing it simply through the process you're already doing it by capturing, by just using the barcode, it automatically just starts making you smarter about what you have and what you don't have and where your product's going.
Yeah, I did some video clips after Euro Shop last February, and I'll of course be going again this February. And it became readily apparent, that as you walk through, same thing at NRF. I mean, those conferences are saturated with computer vision, AI, and it's starting to settle down. We're getting off the Gartner hype cycle where, AI is going to revolutionize humanity, and we're starting to get down to so what. And what struck me was that we are in a very different era as risk mitigation leaders, i.e., asset protection, loss prevention. When I first came to the industry, innovation was limited to locking it up or putting an EAS tag on it. That was it. There was no other option. And they're all one trick ponies. They did nothing but hopefully stop theft. That was it. I mean, no matter how hard I tried to say, oh, you're going to sell more and blah, 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 all that BS, that's a very vague and untenable argument. In today's environment, as a risk mitigation leader, I have more options than I've ever had, whether it's serialization, RFID, computer vision, robotics, you name it. So the fact that we're still in the position of struggling with shrink in 2026, I'm hoping for the Sputnik moment when, the finance guys finally say, enough. We're no longer going to write off, $5 billion in merchandise every year because of inefficiencies and the lack of visibility. We're going to invest in visibility, then we'll know what the hell's going on. So, guys, we'll close out here. Thank you very much, Jacob.
Thank you.
If you want more information, DiSa, what is the website? Because if you Google DiSa, it comes up with an insurance company or something.
Yeah, digital-safety.com.
Okay, and Greatly appreciate it. Serialization, very different from the advancements in point of sale activation, but both are there under the banner of inventory visibility and inventory management. So if you're a total retail loss executive, you need to do a deep dive on these guys. So greatly appreciate it, Jacob. And we'll see you soon, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brand.